Hi again. John Wesley Bready in This Freedom Whence, the chapter Christendom Whither Bound, page 314. The post-Whitefieldian development of the evangelical movement in America is a subject too expansive in range, too epic in consequence, to permit even of outline here. Francis Asbury, Wesley's master builder in America, was a characteristic product of the revival. His theological college, as Dr. Curnock puts it, was his mother's class meeting. From infancy he imbibed the evangelical spirit. When 18, he undertook the labors of a local preacher. When 21, he was appointed by Wesley as an itinerant, and for 5 years, that is from 1766 to 1771, he labored zealously and effectively on 4 different circuits in England. Then, when 26, in the year following Whitefield's death, he volunteered for America, where for 45 years, till his demise in 1816, he toiled with a constancy and selflessness resemblant of Wesley himself. Asbury was endowed with none of Whitefield's dramatic, spectacular gifts, but attaining a much riper age, he labored nearly 4 times as long on American soil, and being par excellence a conciliator, organizer, and builder, he was singularly adapted to follow the fiery awakener. Scarcely had Asbury landed in America when friends importuned him to confine his labors to the more populous centers. They knew not their man. Asbury, above all, was a trailbreaker, a frontiersman, a pioneer. From the first he determined that the most isolated settlers must enjoy the privileges and inspirations of an organized religious life. His passion, like that of Wesley, was to serve the most neglected. Hence, decade after decade, despite the perils of the Revolutionary War, despite extreme changes of climate and fury of elements, despite the lurking dangers of untracked forests, quicksand bogs, turbulent torrents, bridgeless rivers, and forbidding mountains, he rode regularly, some 5,000 miles a year, winning wherever he went devoted followers who became local leaders, and creating wherever he went class meetings, societies, Sunday schools, circuits, and finally, conferences. This Staffordshire peasant became perhaps the most creative religious statesman the North American continent has yet known. Owing nothing to the schools of his day, he was entirely the product of religion. Love, sympathy, vision, courage, faith, and prayer made him great. For 13 years before Dr. Coke arrived to ordain him, he had been in the wilds, or to the wilds of America, their chief shepherd of souls. His ordination, therefore, but proclaimed him what already he was, a superintendent, a bishop, over the far-separated flocks of Christ, which his own ministrations had so largely led into the fold. Other of Wesley's leaders, including Philip Embury, Barbara Heck, and Captain Webb, were at work in America long before Asbury arrived. Coke, his fellow superintendent, with his scholarly and executive powers, rendered memorable service. But to the saintly Bishop Asbury must go the honor of being father in God to the largest Protestant church the New World knows, that is, the Methodist Church. His life was a marvel, almost a miracle, of consecration and attainment. Like Wesley, he rose habitually at 4 a.m., and like Wesley, too, he strove to account for every moment of every day. Self-taught, without fixed abode, a man of the roads, he made it his rule to read 100 pages of good literature daily. He taught himself Latin, Greek, and Hebrew. Always his saddlebags were packed with books which he himself had mastered, and many of these he persuaded not only his preachers and class leaders, but thousands of his humblest followers to buy and read. House-to-house visitation, field preaching, barn preaching, and camp meetings in tents were among his chief means of establishing contact with pioneer communities, and always his converts he organized into classes and societies, thus nurturing local leadership. Log schools and churches, accordingly reared by the cooperative bees of settlers who hungered for understanding and righteousness, rose up as beacon lights wherever this holy man went. The salary of this peerless missionary, for the greater part of his life, was under £20 a year. Money, to him, like time and life, was a trust from God, and this spirit he breathed into the whole heroic band of his co-workers in the gospel. In the formative days of the young republic's life, these apostolic missioners outmarched the prospectors and gold hunters. They outtoiled the homesteaders and ranchers. What Lincoln came to mean to the social and political life of the United States, that Asbury before him meant to her moral and religious life. Indeed, apart from the Bible and spiritual influences mediated by Asbury and his fellow enthusiasts, there is no understanding Lincoln. Bishop Asbury could claim apostolic succession only through Wesley, the baptism of fire, and the gospel of Christ. Often his episcopal status has been ridiculed. Yet, if by their fruits they are known, he was a bishop indeed. And the root meaning, of course, of bishop is overseer. Yet, if by their fruits they are known, he was a bishop indeed. In the single decade, 1780 to 1790, the American Methodist circuits increased from 20 to 114, and their church membership from 8,500 to 57,500. This amazing achievement represented the first harvest of Asbury's sowing, and it successively became the seed of mightier harvests ahead. More on Methodism next time. I'll put in a link to what Charles Taze Russell said as to who was fulfilling Matthew 24, verse 14. See you soon.